When author J.K. Rowling went full mask-off anti-trans bigot in the otherwise good and normal year 2020, it came as a big blow to adults who had once been annoying children. Afterwards, from Neil Gaiman to Chuck Tingle, many big names online who generally had a reputation as being queer or queer-friendly rallied in defense of the trans community. Many folks I knew in my own life who enjoyed the Harry Potter series as children were quick to disavow both Rowling and the books as a whole. For them, it was not such a big deal that the author of a thing they'd liked when they were a kid was actually maybe a bad person. In fact, it could even be argued that people actually get a sense of satisfaction from being able to cancel the creator of a media they outgrew. I'd argue that this is particularly the case when these works contain elements that, in retrospect, do not align with one's adult morals. It can be a bit funny, in a sort of twisted way, that you thought that sort of thing was normal when you were a kid and you didn't know better. When you look at the Harry Potter series, it is true that the last two scenes involve the main character of the books asking his slave to bring him a sandwich, and then revealing 19 years later that he had grown up to be a wizard cop. Plenty of folks who read this as a kid had, in the broader context of the series, no reason to raise an eyebrow at this. It was a happy ending. All was well. Sure, in retrospect, it's fun to clap back at the Harry Potter fans who are upset about Rowling's transphobia with, "What did you expect from the woman who made hook-nosed evil goblin bankers?" But when I was 10 years old, the Harry Potter books were my favorite thing in the entire world. After I finished reading the series, I read it all through again, and then again, and again. I begged my mom to make me my own Hufflepuff robes because we couldn't afford the officially licensed ones at the newly opened Wizarding World of Harry Potter. I begged my friends to play wizards with me. I wanted desperately to one day find out that I was secretly magic and that there was a whole hidden world waiting for me where everyone thought I was a hero. For a queer kid like me, who constantly struggled to fit in, that was the ultimate fantasy. In Queer and Now and Tendencies, queer theorist Eve Sedgwick describes the phenomenon of queer overreading. She says,
I think that for many of us in childhood, the ability to attach intently to a few cultural objects, objects of high or popular culture or both, objects whose meaning seemed mysterious, excessive, or oblique in relation to the codes most readily available to us, became a prime resource for survival.
and oh boy, did my young self attach intently to the wizarding world described in the Harry Potter books. But I wanted more than just the text available. Not long after my obsession began, I found that I was not satisfied with the content on the page. For instance, regarding the wizard cop epilogue, I couldn't stop thinking about how Harry really should have ended up as a school teacher instead. Not because I had any particular understanding of policing as inherently unjust, but because I didn't think becoming a wizard cop made sense for his character. And I had questions about the world that the text didn't answer. So, I sat down on my family computer and read everything available on J.K. Rowling's expanded Harry Potter universe website, then called Pottermore. This, too, wasn't enough for me. Eventually, I made my way to a website called fanfiction.net. There, I read stories about the world of Harry Potter, but where things played out differently. Characters formed relationships they didn't have in the published book series, and some of these relationships were between characters of the same sex. Almost as long as there has been Harry Potter, there has been gay fan fiction about the characters in Harry Potter. In the early days of the Harry Potter fandom, much of the creation of queer fan fiction lived on forums and messaging groups which have been largely lost to time. HP/ is one of those groups. Slash is a label used to describe fan fiction written about two characters of the same sex. It was founded in February of 2000, the year before the release of the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone movie, and a few months before the release of Book 4, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Unfortunately, I was able to find little actual evidence of what fan fiction was posted on this messaging group. It's gone now and wasn't logged on the Wayback Machine. But the Fandom and Harry Potter wikis all agree that there was one particular fanfiction of note circulated here. The date is June 18th. The year is 2000. The fandom is Harry Potter. The group is HP/. The author is Jack F. The fanfiction title is The Kiss of Life. And the pairing, appearing in fanfiction together for, as far as I can tell, the first time, is Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy. Nowadays, Draco/Harry is by and away the most popular pairing in the Harry Potter fandom and has held that title for a good while now. Draco/Hermione and Remus/Sirius are eternally vying for second place. This subculture, which started in 2000 and is still going strong, is going to serve as our case study today. I want to start with a brief defining of terms and backstory here. Harry Potter is the main character of the Harry Potter series. Draco Malfoy is his nemesis throughout the books, serving as a main antagonist occasionally, but more often sort of an annoyance or a foil to Harry. Where Harry has abusive parental figures but is a brave and kind person, Draco has doting parents and is a mean coward. The two fight pretty consistently through the books, but as the series goes on, the stakes of their rivalry become less and less serious as the true antagonist of the series, Lord Voldemort, gains power and starts straight up murdering people. The books show over and over that Draco is mostly just a scared kid who was raised by extremists and parrots his parents' belief in search of approval. A lot of people on the internet have thought for a long time that these two characters, Harry and Draco, should be in gay love with each other. This pairing has gone by a couple of names over the years, but is largely known these days as Drarry, a portmanteau of the characters' names. You might also hear them called HPDM for Harry Potter/Draco Malfoy, or in some early cases, Guns and Handcuffs, in reference to two popular fanfictions in the early fandom. This is a massive fandom, spanning across early blogging site LiveJournal, fanfiction.net, and the more contemporary archive of our own, as well as websites like Wattpad, Tumblr, Reddit, and Twitter. Some of the people who wrote Drarry fiction, particularly early on, went on to become popular authors in their own right. Quite notably, this list includes Cassandra Clare, author of the Mortal Instruments series and its assorted spin-offs, Naomi Novik, who is one of the founders of Archive of Our Own and the author of the Scholomance and Temeraire series, and Sarah Rees Brennan, author of In Other Lands, which is one of my favorite books. Alright, so we know what Drarry is. Now I want to talk a bit about how queer fandoms come to be and what they mean to the people involved in them. There's some good academia out there exploring the role of queer fandom and queer identity exploration. In their 2021 article, Coming Out of the Cupboard, a Phenomenological Exploration of Fandom and LGBTQ Identity, Catherine E. Kavanaugh talked to queer Harry Potter fans about their relationship with the source material, its fan communities, and their own sexualities and gender identities. One particular quote stuck out to me here. Stevani, for example, expressed that they are very interested in queerifying Harry Potter characters through their fan works, for example, reimagining Luna Lovegood as asexual or Remus Lupin as transgender. Stevani was especially interested in bringing in queer representations of gender and expressed, "It's so nice because it feels like it's giving the trans community more visibility within the Harry Potter community." Now, something might stick out to you about this quote. And yes, this article was published in 2021, a year after Rowling publicly began to spout anti-trans ideology. But before we talk about how the Drarry fandom actually reacted to Rowling's transphobia, I want to talk about how we might be able to expect them to react. For this, I turned to Lucy Neville's article, The Tent's Big Enough for Everyone, Online/Fiction as a Site for Activism and Change. In this article, Neville conducted survey research of specifically women involved in MM/fiction writing spaces. She found that only 13% of the women who took part in this research felt that their involvement with MM erotic writing had not impacted on their awareness of issues around gender and sexuality. 13% weren't sure, and 74% felt it had an effect. 68% also felt that what they had read and or wrote had some sort of political angle. 30% didn't think so, and 2% were undecided. Also of note, more than half, 55%, of the women surveyed identified with a sexual orientation other than heterosexual. On this front, Neville noted that a large number of participants who did not identify as heterosexual commented on how their involvement with Slash had helped them to better understand their own gender identity and sexual orientation. All of this is to say that the evidence pretty clearly paints a picture of slash fandom spaces as being broadly accepting towards gay and trans identities, which seem to have been largely lumped together in at least the research I encountered. This then certainly seems to imply that a space like the Drarry fandom, a fan community for a slash ship with a long history and a large internet presence, might find itself at odds with someone spouting anti-trans ideology, even if that person is the author of the books that started it all. So let's talk about the relationship between the Drarry fandom and J.K. Rowling. From the beginning, it's clear that Rowling had a complicated relationship with queer readings of her work. For years, the thing supporters of Rowling would point to in order to assert that she was an ally towards the gay community was the character of Albus Dumbledore. In the books, Dumbledore starts out as a wise, eclectic mentor figure, but grows more complicated in the latter half of the series as the reader learns that he has a bit more of a morally gray past. Part of this past was a close, intense friendship with the wizard Grindelwald, who grew up to be evil. In 2007, following the release of the final book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Rowling said in a fan Q&A that she'd always seen Dumbledore as being gay. This kicked up a bit of a shitstorm of typical 2000s homophobia, which gave Rowling that straight martyr for the gay community status she seems to be really addicted to these days. But while one could argue on behalf of queer coding in the books themselves do not say Dumbledore is gay. They simply don't. If presenting a character in a close relationship with another man made them explicitly, undeniably, textually gay, then we would be living in a cooler and better media landscape. For Rowling, saying that Dumbledore was gay after the release of the final book in the Harry Potter series really allowed her to have her cake and eat it too. She could retain status as being an ally without actually having to do anything controversial in her books in terms of representation. However, even beyond her general cowardice towards representation in her books, Rowling's queer fandom has always had beef with her, even prior to Turfgate. For instance, in 2016, on the werewolf professor character of Remus Lupin, Rowling said that
Lupin's condition of lycanthropy was a metaphor for those illnesses that carry a stigma, like HIV and AIDS.
On first blush, this is insensitive. On a closer look, once you realize that another werewolf character in the book Greyback purposefully seeks out and bites and infects children with lycanthropy, this concept of lycanthropy as an HIV/AIDS allegory reads as downright malicious. Even ignoring these wildly problematic implications, Lupin failing to properly manage his illness and turning into a wolf at an inopportune time is the thing that makes the whole plan in the third act of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban fall apart, and also is the thing that makes Lupin think that him losing his job is justified. It's bad, is what I'm saying. And I wasn't the only one to think so. This is the sort of thing that put Rowling in constant hot water with her queer fandom. Beyond that, though, Rowling has expressed a sort of open hostility towards the Drarry fandom through her loud and public dislike of the character of Draco, a character she created. On the subject, she said in 2014 that
Draco has all the dark glamour of the anti-hero. Girls are very apt to romanticize such people. All of this left me in the unenviable position of pouring cold common sense on ardent readers' daydreams, as I told them, rather severely, that Draco was not concealing a heart of gold under all that sneering and prejudice, and that no, he and Harry were not destined to end up best friends.
So, sort of the opposite of confirmation of the ship as canon. But honestly, unlike a lot of more modern fandoms, Drarry shippers don't seem to have ever been all that concerned about canon. On archiveofourown.org, a popular fanfiction website that I'm going to be abbreviating to AO3 from here on out, there is a commonly used tag in the Harry Potter fandom at large, and on Drarry fanfiction in specific, which reads, Harry Potter Epilogue What Epilogue, or EWE. This tag is in reference to that unsatisfying epilogue I touched on earlier, in which all of the book's characters are happily heterosexual married with children named after other dead characters, and no changes seem to have been made to the status quo, and Harry is a cop. On AO3, tagging is a system that allows people to find works which have certain specific elements. Common tags might be for fluff, which is generally lighthearted and comforting fanfiction, angst, which is what it sounds like, humor, which is what it sounds like, and anal sex, which is what it sounds like. Fandom-specific tags do exist, but are not incredibly standardized, which means that the most used tags often end up looking something like this. Fluff, angst, alternate universe, hurt/comfort, first kiss. Fluff, alternate universe, modern setting. Angst, alternate universe still have powers. Fluff, alternate universe, modern setting. Angst, slow burn, hurt/comfort. If a tag is fandom specific, it often refers to a specific version of a character, pre-serum Steve Rogers, human Castiel, or Mandalore Din Djarin, for example. All of this to say then that I think Harry Potter Epilogue What Epilogue shows a perhaps unique level of contempt for the source material. It's the fourth most popular tag for Drarry fanfiction, with, at time of writing, a full 6,788 works that are about Drarry tagged with it. In the broader Harry Potter fandom, it's the 10th most popular, with a total 18,194 works tagged as such. To me, then, this establishes that the Drarry fandom, while it is clearly interested in the characters from the Harry Potter books, does not take J.K. Rowling's word as word of God. Instead, this points towards a tendency to pick and choose parts of the canon text, keeping what fic authors find interesting and disregarding what they dislike. So, even prior to Rowling's mask-off transphobia reveal, the Drarry fandom had a bit of a contentious relationship with J.K. Rowling. Now comes the million-galleon question. How did the Drarry fandom react to Rowling's transphobia, and how has Rowling's transphobia impacted the Drarry fandom? Well, let's look at the numbers. Disclaimer, I am not a statistician. I got a 3 on my AP Stats exam in high school, and that was the last math class I ever took. So, be gentle. I started off using data from the AO3 Ship Stats project, as collected by Center of These Lights, which is a really cool project documenting the most popular ships each year. Here's all of their data on Drarry charted. This is the total number of fanfictions written in the Draco Malfoy/Harry Potter tag on AO3 as of summer of 2023, showing growth over time. But I found this data wasn't actually as useful as I could have hoped. Primarily, I think this was the case because the AO3 Ship Stats project only collects data on ships and is more interested in the growth of ships in relation to one another than charting one ship's change over time. All it really shows us is that the ship has continued to grow, albeit at a somewhat uneven pace, over the last 10 years. So instead, let's look at the number of new fanfictions written in the tag each year. We could do this a number of ways, including by using the AO3 Ship Stats data, but I decided to collect my own data because I thought it would give me more flexibility. I did this using the Wayback Machine to look at snapshots of the Draco Malfoy/Harry Potter tag on AO3, approximately once every 6 months, starting in January of 2013 and going through to January of 2024. I then did a bunch of annoying spreadsheet math and eventually came up with an approximate number of new fics written in the Draco Malfoy/Harry Potter tag over the course of each year from 2013 to 2023. Charting this should give us an idea of the changing rate of growth of this pairing on AO3 over time. And here it is in a line graph. But there's a problem with analyzing these data in a vacuum. archiveofourown.org is not that old of a website. Its beta only opened in 2009, and for a long time it was less popular than its main competitor, fanfiction.net. However, in recent years it has experienced rapid growth. So some of the growth of Drarry seen here is likely due to the growth of AO3 as a whole. I could think of 2 ways to adjust for this. One would be to compile the data for fanfiction.net as well, and while I'm at it, maybe also Wattpad and LiveJournal. But those sites are significantly more challenging to navigate and often pretty poorly archived. So instead I went for the second route, which was to find a control group on AO3 to compare the Drarry data to. At first, this sort of stumped me. I didn't want to do something else in the Harry Potter fandom because I figured the data would be too similar and affected by similar extraneous factors, but in many ways the Harry Potter fandom is pretty singular in its ability to sustain itself long after the generation of new canon source material mostly stopped. It wouldn't be fair to compare Drarry in 2018, 7 years after the last Harry Potter movie came out and 9 years after the last book, to a pairing like Destiel from Supernatural, a show that aired until 2020. So, after some thought, I decided not to use a pairing at all. Instead, I picked a tag that I had found in earlier research to be ubiquitous and consistent across fandoms. This tag was fluff. I did the same process for gathering data on the fluff tag as I did on the Draco Malfoy / Harry Potter tag, and this gave me my control. So now we have a dataset that I'm going to be using as a representation of AO3 as a whole. I recognize that this is a bit of a logical leap on my behalf, so remember the thing I said before about me not being a statistician. We can see some trends are consistent across both Drarry and our control. There is a broader trend towards growth over time in both datasets. Both also experienced a spike in new fics written in 2020, which, given that everyone was locked inside for a lot of that year, doesn't come as a huge surprise to me. In both groups, this spike doesn't seem to have necessarily translated into sustained exponential growth. However, there are also some notable differences. Drarry experienced a significant spike in 2017. Obviously, I can't say with any authority a direct cause for this, but it is worth noting that Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, a broadly disliked by fanons semi-canon play, was released in book form at the end of July of 2016, with a revised version released in July of 2017. Given that it's pretty common knowledge that release of new canon content, whether or not the fandom likes that content, correlates with creation of new fanworks, this doesn't exactly come as a surprise to me. Also notable is that after 2020, Drarry experienced a more steep drop-off in content creation than our control. To further investigate this, and stick with me here, I made a chart of the ratio of Drarry growth compared to fluff growth. That is to say, I compared the rate at which new Drarry fanfiction was being posted to the rate at which new fanfictions tagged with fluff were being posted, which we're taking here to represent the growth of the AO3 platform as a whole. This graph showed me that Drarry actually started to really lag behind in 2020, even with the spike we saw in its data. So during 2020, even though more Drarry fics were posted than in years prior, Drarry was still failing to keep up with the growth of AO3 as a whole. In 2017, during that peak, there were a little over 4 fics tagged with Draco Malfoy / Harry Potter to every 100 fics tagged with fluff. By 2020, there were less than 2, and this decline really got going in 2020. Now you might be asking, what happened in 2020? Oh, that's right. This is a J.K. Rowling transphobia video. What happened in 2020 was that J.K. Rowling did a transphobia.
People who menstruate. I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wumbin, Wimpond, Woomud.
And after she did that, people started posting fewer and fewer new fanfictions in the Drarry tag. I'm not saying that this is a direct causation effect because, and I can't stress this enough, I barely passed that AP statistics test. But one thing I do remember from that class is that correlation is not causation. I can't tell you that J.K. Rowling coming out as an out and proud transphobe caused people to leave the Drarry fan community or stop posting new Drarry fanfiction. This data doesn't disprove that theory, but I can't tell you that's what happened. In the original script of this video, I said, I don't have to tell you that because Drarry fans will do it for me. I expected that these accounts of leaving the fandom behind would be a dime a dozen. I looked really hard to find testimonies. I found some snippets in articles.
Does hating JKR mean I can't like Harry Potter? I don't know, honestly. This magical world that brought me joy, comfort, and solace for over 20 years suddenly feels tainted.
Got to say, I took this one pretty fucking hard when it finally got past the point where it was vaguely credible that JKR was speaking and acting out of ignorance, not malice. The HP series and its fandom got me through some extremely dark times as a teenager and young adult, and for all that there were some very dodgy world-building decisions in there, the central message of the book was very firmly against bigotry and bullying, and that's something my generation really needed to hear.
I cannot even look at anything Harry Potter related without getting a sick feeling in my stomach because of Joanne's transphobia. Harry Potter used to be the one thing that bonded me and my family. We would go to the movie premieres together, read the books together, and just geek out over it. Another reason why her transphobia has hurt me personally, and not just because I myself am trans, is because it took away a connection between myself and my family, for I refuse to continue to support anything she made, but they still continue to support anything Harry Potter related. But I really can't say conclusively if that's why people left, because now no one on the social internet that I can find, particularly Tumblr, Twitter, and Reddit, which is where I'm aware of fan community spaces being centered these days, is talking in an open or vulnerable way about this subject. Instead, all I can do is analyze the discourse around Drarry and Harry Potter fandom at large in the state it's in today. It's worth noting here that I'm not interested in the people who agree with Rowling's transphobic statements. By my observation, those are mostly not the folks making new fanworks and slash communities, and instead are sad people who spend a lot of time being upset on Twitter about things. Of the other folks, the majority of this fandom community I've been discussing, I divide adults online who are still talking about Harry Potter into 3 camps. We're going to call them the burners, the denialists, and the fuckets. The burners are easy to describe. These people would not consider themselves a part of the Harry Potter fandom. I talked about them in the intro. In short, the folks in this camp believe that Harry Potter as a series is entirely irredeemable, and anyone creating or consuming fan content about the books is actively platforming J.K. Rowling and enabling her transphobic. I.e., they think we should burn it all down. So, burners. If you go on any social media platform where people might talk about Harry Potter, these takes are all over the place. They often include the phrase, read another book. These sorts of posts tend to do well, but I believe they're largely made by people who weren't what I might call practicing Harry Potter fans when Rowling went full mask-off turf. That is to say, a lot of people were involved in the Harry Potter fandom as a kid when they read the books for the first time, and then grew out of that phase of their life the same way you might grow out of role-playing warrior cats on your friend's Minecraft server. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything. I'm sure that isn't the case for everyone making posts about how the Harry Potter books have always been irredeemable trash and you're bad for having liked them at 11 or whatever, but that's a trend I've noticed. One loud contingency of the Drarry fandom community these days is what I'd call the denialists. The poster child of this movement sounds something like this. J.K. Rowling didn't write Harry Potter, Hatsune Miku wrote Harry Potter. These folks seem to want to live in the world that existed prior to Rowling revealing herself to be transphobic. The most extreme camp often discuss the Harry Potter books as if they're sacred texts, which came into being one day without any trace of the baggage or ideology that might come with a creator of any sort. But I'd argue that the denialist label also includes everyone who just doesn't talk about it. Perhaps these fans are straight and or cis, and don't care all that much if Rowling sucks and hates trans people. Perhaps they have their own inner struggles about it, but choose not to discuss them online. I don't know what these denialists think, because they just don't talk about it. The rest of the Drarry fan community, as I observe it, are mostly what I'd call the fuckets. And that is to say, short for, fuck it, this is my sandbox. Just because the creator is a bad person doesn't mean I'm not going to play in it. In my opinion, the thing that differentiates the fuckets from the denialists is a willingness to admit to and examine the more problematic aspects of the original Harry Potter series, alongside a more spiteful attitude towards Rowling herself. Here's a few examples from fic authors' notes.
2022 edit. Obviously, we're already operating on the notion that there are several problematic aspects of Rowling's books, but just in case it wasn't clear from my rather heavy-handed narrative adjustments, I do not support TERF extraordinaire J.K. Rowling. However, I refuse to let her shitty worldviews ruin my nostalgia or my love for the HP fandom I've grown up with. Just to make that clear.
Finally, although I obviously enjoy the Harry Potter world, like any decent person, I've been dispirited and furious at JKR's growing transphobia, and it feels necessary when writing with her characters to acknowledge that she is both harmful and utterly wrong. Dykes for their trans comrades, Illy.
I am a proud gay trans man, and I am no longer taking any shit from fucking TERFs.
I condemn J.K. Rowling's recent transphobic, inaccurate, and dangerous statements on sex and gender identity. If you agree with her views, please do not read, comment on, or kudo this fanfic. I support the rights of transgender people to be called by their chosen pronouns, respected in their expression of gender, and treated fairly and equally in all things.
Fuck J.K. Rowling, we are taking custody of Harry and Draco.
In the most obvious cases, the fuck it mentality generates stuff like Chuck Tingle's Harriet Porber works and transfemme Harry Potter content on AO3. But beyond making characters trans, works in this camp often also want to unpack what's up with house elves. Why does the Ministry of Magic work the way it does? Or what does the wizarding world look like beyond Hogwarts in a way that isn't fucking stupid? I find that works here also are more likely to deal with race in a meaningful way. In some of these fics, Harry as a character is not white. Often he's presented as mixed race, with his mother and thus his abusive aunt and uncle being white, but with his father being a person of color. Sometimes he connects with familial roots in these fanfictions, opening up a new avenue for character exploration and growth. I'd like to argue that this sort of fan work is deeply valuable. While I understand the desire to burn it all down if it means deplatforming J.K. Rowling, I simply don't think this is actually achievable. While the Drarry fandom, with its long-running community, is on the decline, that doesn't mean people are leaving Harry Potter behind. In fact, the heterosexual Hermione pairing is on an upswing, with one popular work soon to be traditionally published. So, sure, if you don't want to see Harry Potter content on your Tumblr dashboard because the series author is a raging bigot, I can't blame you. But clearly, many of the people for whom these books are meaningful aren't willing to let them go. So to me, this fuck it fic, which might tag itself as Fix It on AO3 right alongside Harry Potter Epilogue What Epilogue, is doing important work. By engaging with this text in a subversive and interesting way, authors of this sort of fic are giving both themselves and their readers a space to unpack and explore what of Harry Potter worked for them and what it meant to them, while challenging and dissecting the aspects that didn't work or that might have been harmful. I also think that this fandom can still serve as a valuable identity exploration and formation space because it continues to be populated by queer people who find their own meaning in Harry Potter, regardless of what J.K. Rowling thinks it means. That is to say that fuck it fic authors are maybe the last good defense against J.K. Rowling declaring that every evil wizard was trans. By claiming their own authority over the world of Harry Potter, queer and trans fans make the wizarding world safe for them, safe for us. And I personally want a 10-year-old who looks around for Harry Potter fanfiction after they finish reading the last book they checked out from the library to find work that has something good and interesting to say on the subject. That was an important part of my own identity formation, and I would be sad to see that space go. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Eli. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe if you want to see more. This was my first ever video essay, but I got plenty of ideas up in the old dome. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Part of this past was a close, intense friendship with the wizard Grindelwald.